The war room of the Catherine Empire stretched across half a kilometer of polished obsidian floor. Holographic displays floated in the air like captured stars, each one showing a different conquered world. 47 systems, 47 victories. The Empire had never known defeat, and today would mark the beginning of their 48th triumph. Fleet Commander Zalthor stood before the Supreme Council, with his forearms crossed in a gesture of absolute confidence. His scales gleamed under the artificial lights, each one bearing the marks of battles won and enemies crushed. Behind him, the largest holographic display showed a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Earth. The survey is complete. Supreme Council, Zalthor announced, his voice carrying the weight of certain victory. The humans of Earth are barely beyond their own atmosphere. They have no shields. Their weapons are primitive. They still use kinetic projectiles and chemical propulsion. Their largest warship would not survive a single shot from our smallest frigate. Council member Brikath leaned forward, her 6 eyes studying the data streams. They have achieved spaceflight. They have split the atom. Are we certain they pose no threat? Zalthor's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Supreme One, they have 12 space stations and perhaps 200 satellites. We have conquered species with 1,000 times their capability. The humans argue among themselves, divided into nearly 200 nations. They cannot even unite their own world. This will not be a war. It will be a harvest. The hologram shifted, showing Earth's cities glowing in the darkness. Their power grid spread across continents like veins of light. The planet was rich beyond measure. Rare metals, diverse biology, water in abundance, and 8 billion humans who would serve the Empire or be eliminated. Supreme Leader Krathanak rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. He had ruled the Empire for 300 cycles, and in all that time he had never questioned a military assessment. How many ships do you require, Commander? For a world this primitive, 50 would be excessive, Supreme Leader. Zalthor's confidence filled the room like radiation, but we should make a statement. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who possess resources the Empire desires. I request 300 warships. A murmur rippled through the council. 300 ships. It was the largest fleet ever assembled against a Tier 3 civilization. Species far more advanced had fallen to forces 1/10 that size. Granted, Krathanak declared. Make it quick. Make it absolute. And Commander, bring me some of these humans alive. I wish to see the species that built such pretty cities before they are put to work in our mines. Zalthor bowed, his heart swelling with pride. This would be the crowning achievement of his career. In a single cycle, perhaps less, Earth would belong to the Empire. His name would be remembered forever as the commander who brought humanity to heel. The fleet assembled in the darkness beyond the Catherine homeworld. 300 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts 5 kilometers long to nimble destroyers that could outrun light itself. Each ship bristled with energy weapons capable of glassing a planet. Each crew was trained in the art of subjugation, perfected over centuries of conquest. Zalthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his fleet form up in perfect military precision. Behind him, his tactical officer reviewed the invasion plan one final time. The human military is fragmented, the officer reported. They have multiple forces that do not coordinate well. Their largest powers possess nuclear weapons, but these are crude devices that would harm their own planet. Intelligence suggests they will surrender once they see our superiority. And if they don't, asked the ship's second officer, then we demonstrate on one of their cities. The ruins of Paris or New York or Beijing will convince the others. Zalthor's tone was matter-of-fact. He had done this before. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force. Destroy one population center. Accept surrender. Begin exploitation. The fleet entered jump space, tearing a hole in reality itself. The journey to Earth would take 6 weeks. Zalthor spent that time reviewing human culture such as it was. He found them peculiar. They created art and music even in their most impoverished regions. They told stories about heroes who stood against impossible odds. They seemed obsessed with the concept of freedom, whatever that meant to a species that had never known true order. One thing did concern him, though he mentioned it to no one. Humans fought among themselves constantly. Their history was soaked in blood. Wars that killed millions, weapons designed for the sole purpose of killing other humans. They had even developed doctrines for something they called total war, where every resource and every citizen became part of the war machine. But that was against each other, Zalthor reminded himself. Against an external threat, against an enemy from the stars, they would crumble. They always did. Fear was universal. The fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the Sol system, their arrival lighting up every sensor on every human satellite within range. Zalthor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the primitive detection systems light up with alarm. Open all frequencies, he commanded. Broadcast in their dominant languages. The message was simple and had been used 47 times before. People of Earth, you have been judged worthy of service to the Catherine Empire. Surrender your weapons and your governments. Comply and your transition will be painless. Resist and we will demonstrate the futility of defiance. You have one planetary rotation to respond. The communications officer looked puzzled. Commander, we are receiving thousands of transmissions. The humans are broadcasting on every frequency. What do they say? Most are panic, Commander. But there is one transmission that keeps repeating from multiple sources. It appears to be their official response. Play it. The voice that came through the speakers was human, male, speaking in their language called English. The translation software rendered it instantly. To the Catherine Empire, we have received your message. We decline. Come and try. Silence fell across the bridge. Officers looked at each other in confusion. In 47 conquests, no species had responded with such simple defiance. There were usually negotiations, pleas for mercy, offers of partial surrender. Zalthor felt a strange sensation ripple through his body. Not fear, he did not know fear, but something close to it. A whisper of doubt. They don't understand, he said firmly. Prepare a demonstration. Target their largest city, Beijing. Charge weapons for a surgical strike on their government district. That will clarify matters. The weapons officer hesitated. Commander, our sensors are detecting unusual activity. The humans are launching thousands of objects into orbit. Small craft, satellites, even what appears to be modified cargo vessels. Irrelevant. They're panicking. Execute the strike. The fleet moved into Earth's orbital space like a predator circling wounded prey. Zalthor watched the blue planet grow larger on his screens and allowed himself to imagine the victory celebrations. 300 ships against a species that couldn't even generate energy shields. This would be over before the cycle ended. The weapons officer called out firing solutions. Energy built in the Eternal Dominion's main cannon. Enough power to vaporize 10 city blocks in an instant. The shot would kill millions and break humanity's will to resist. Fire, Zalthor commanded. The cannon discharged, a beam of pure energy crossing the distance to Earth in a fraction of a second. It struck the atmosphere and began to burn through toward Beijing. And then something impossible happened. The beam scattered, diffused. A network of satellites had positioned themselves in its path, each one detonating in a carefully timed sequence that dispersed the energy across the upper atmosphere. The sky over Beijing lit up like a second sun for 3 seconds, but when the light faded, the city remained intact. What? Zalthor began. Multiple launches from the surface, the tactical officer shouted. Thousands of missiles. Chemical propulsion, but moving fast. Impact in 30 seconds. Shields will hold. They're primitive weapons. But the missiles weren't aimed at his ships. They were aimed at each other. As Zalthor watched in growing horror, the missiles detonated in a carefully orchestrated pattern across orbital space. Nuclear weapons. Dozens of them. The electromagnetic pulse from the blasts washed across his fleet like a wave. Shields flickered. Electronics screamed. 3 destroyers lost power completely, their systems fried by the intensity of the pulse. And in that moment of confusion, as his fleet struggled to compensate, the humans struck. They came from everywhere at once. Small craft that had been disguised as debris. Modified shuttles packed with explosives. Even humans in primitive spacesuits, hundreds of them, launched from railguns on the surface. They flew toward the fleet like bullets, and many died in the void. But those who reached the ships clamped onto hulls and began cutting their way inside. Boarders! Someone screamed. They're boarding the ships! Zalthor couldn't process it. Boarding actions were a relic of ancient warfare. No species had attempted such a tactic in millennia. It was suicide. The humans would die by the thousands. But they kept coming. Alarms blared across the fleet. Ship after ship reported breaches. Human soldiers were inside their vessels, fighting in corridors, dying in droves, but always pushing forward. Zalthor listened to the reports in stunned disbelief. Destroyer Krath's Fist reports 50% casualties. Humans are using weapons they shouldn't have. They're jamming our communications. They're everywhere. A new sound filled the command channel. Singing. The humans were singing as they died. War songs. Battle hymns. Songs about death and glory and never surrendering. All ships pull back to defensive formation, Zalthor ordered, his voice tight. Execute emergency jump protocols. We regroup and the transmission cut off as the lights on his bridge flickered. An explosion echoed through the hull. His own ship. They were on his own ship. The last thing Zalthor recorded in his personal log, before the bridge doors exploded inward and human soldiers in armor marked with a flag of stars and stripes poured through, was a single sentence. They fight like gods of war. May mercy find us, for we have found none here. The battle raged for 3 days. Of the 300 ships that entered Earth's space, none returned to Catherine territory. Some were destroyed. Some were captured. Some simply vanished, their crews dead, their systems corrupted by human cyber weapons that turned their own technology against them. And in the void of space, among the debris of the greatest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, human ships began salvaging the wreckage, learning, adapting, preparing. Earth had sent a message to the galaxy. It was written in the burning hulls of 300 warships and the silence of an empire that had finally met its match. The message was simple. We are humanity, and we do not surrender. 3 months had passed since the fleet had entered the Sol system. 3 months of absolute silence. The Catherine Empire's military command center operated around the clock, monitoring every frequency, every quantum channel, every possible method of communication. Nothing came back. No victory reports. No requests for reinforcements. No distress signals. 300 ships and their crews had simply vanished into the void as if they had never existed. Admiral Kreshvin paced the observation deck of the orbital command station, his 3 hearts beating an irregular rhythm of anxiety. He had served the Empire for 200 cycles. He had overseen dozens of conquests. Never, not once, had an entire fleet gone silent. Check the communication arrays again, he ordered for the 100th time. The communications officer, a young Catherine named Telshar, shook her head. All systems are functional, Admiral. The problem is not on our end. There is simply nothing to receive. A fleet does not disappear. Even in defeat, there are survivors. Escape pods. Emergency beacons, something. Kreshvin's claws scraped against the transparent steel of the viewport. Beyond it, the homeworld of the Catherine turned slowly, beautiful and ignorant of the growing crisis. The Supreme Council had been patient at first. Fleet Commander Zalthor was known for his thoroughness. Perhaps he was simply ensuring complete victory before reporting. But days became weeks and weeks became months. Now the Council demanded answers that Kreshvin could not provide. Prepare reconnaissance drones, he finally commanded. Full stealth configuration. I want them in the Sol system within 2 weeks. And I want answers. The drones were technological marvels, no larger than a human hand, nearly invisible to sensors, capable of faster-than-light travel through microjumps. 20 of them launched in a swarm, each programmed with slightly different search parameters. They would find the fleet, determine what had happened, and return with data. Kreshvin waited. 2 weeks for travel, 1 week for reconnaissance. 2 weeks return. 5 weeks of uncertainty while the Empire held its breath. The first drone returned ahead of schedule. That should have been a good sign. It wasn't. Telshar's face went pale as she processed the incoming data. Admiral, you need to see this. The holographic display activated, showing the Sol system as captured by the drone's sensors. Kreshvin stepped closer, studying the image. At first, everything seemed normal. The yellow star, the 9 planets, the asteroid belt. But then he saw the debris fields. They were everywhere. Massive clouds of wreckage orbiting the 3rd planet, shattered hull plates bearing Catherine military markings, weapons arrays torn from their mountings, entire sections of ships tumbling through the void. The fleet, Telshar whispered. That's our fleet. But it was the close-up images that made Kreshvin's blood run cold. The drone had approached several larger pieces of wreckage, its sensors recording every detail. What it found defied explanation. Hull breaches, but not from energy weapons. These were torn open from the inside. Bulkheads shredded by explosives planted in critical locations. Life support systems deliberately destroyed. And on one piece of wreckage that had once been the command deck of a destroyer, symbols were painted in what analysis confirmed was Catherine blood. The symbols were human letters. They spelled no mercy. What kind of species does this? Telshar asked, her voice trembling. They couldn't have defeated us. They're primitive. The assessment said. The assessment was wrong. Kreshovan forced himself to study the images, though every instinct screamed at him to look away. Send out all the drones. I want every piece of significant wreckage analyzed. I want to know what happened. Over the next week, the remaining drones returned one by one, each carrying more horrifying data than the last. The picture that emerged was not one of battle, but of slaughter. The Catherine fleet had been systematically destroyed, and not by superior technology. One drone had recovered a partial black box from a frigate. The recording was fragmented, damaged by fire and vacuum exposure, but what remained was enough. Kreshovan played it for the senior staff in a sealed chamber, far from the ears of the general population. Static filled the first few seconds. Then a voice. Commander rank by the tone. Breach on deck 7 through 12. Security teams are not responding. Something is wrong. The humans, they're not fighting like an explosion, screams. Then another voice, younger, terrified. They're inside the ship. How are they inside? We're in space. They should be dead. More explosions. The sound of weapons fire. Then a human voice speaking in their language, raw with aggression. The translation came through cold and mechanical. For New York, for Mumbai, for every person you plan to enslave. The Catherine voice again, now edged with panic. They won't stop. We've killed dozens of them, but they keep coming. They're in environmental systems. They're in engineering. They're... A scream, cut short. Then silence, except for a distant sound. Singing. Human singing. The melody strange and haunting. The recording ended. No one in the chamber spoke for a long moment. Kreshovan replayed the recording, listening carefully to every detail. The humans had boarded the ships. Somehow, impossibly, they had reached vessels in space and fought their way inside, and they had done this not to one ship, but across the entire fleet. What were they singing? Asked one of the tactical officers. Telshar checked the translation database. It's called a battle hymn. Humans have many of them. This one is titled The Marine's Hymn. It's about warriors who fight in air, land, and space. There's a line that translates roughly to, "We have fought in every clime and place where we could take a gun." They're insane, someone muttered. Kreshovan shook his head slowly. No, there's something worse. They're committed. More drones returned with more evidence. One had captured images of the human orbital infrastructure. In 3 months, they had transformed their near-space environment. Stations that had been simple research facilities were now armed fortresses. Salvage Catherine technology was everywhere, already integrated into human systems. They had taken the weapons, the shields, the drives from the destroyed fleet and were using them. The humans were learning. Fast, another recording was recovered. This one from a Catherine soldier's personal device. It showed the interior of a ship's corridor. Human soldiers advanced in tight formation, their movements precise and professional. They wore armor cobbled together from human and Catherine materials. Their weapons were primitive kinetic firearms augmented with captured energy cells. What struck Kreshovan was not their equipment, but their faces. He could see their expressions through the transparent visors of their helmets. They were not afraid. They were angry, focused, determined. And worse, they were coordinated in a way the intelligence reports had said was impossible for humans. They united, Telshar said, voicing what everyone was thinking. The report said they were divided into competing nations, that they could never work together, but they're fighting as one force. Kreshovan accessed the drone data again, looking at the broader patterns. Human military forces from dozens of nations were operating in perfect coordination. Ships with different flags worked side by side. Languages that human couldn't normally understand flowed through translation systems. The threat had unified them in a way nothing else ever had. Find more recordings, he ordered. I need to understand what happened in that first battle. I need to know how we lost 300 ships to a species that didn't even have energy shields. The answer came from the most intact black box, recovered from a ship that had apparently been crippled early in the battle. The recording was nearly complete, and it told a story that would haunt the Empire for generations. The Catherine fleet had approached Earth expecting easy victory. They had fired the first shot, attempting to destroy Beijing as a demonstration. But the humans had been ready. The network of satellites that dispersed the energy beam had been deployed weeks earlier, when the first human telescopes detected the approaching fleet. The humans had known the Catherine were coming. They had watched the fleet cross light years of space, and they had prepared. The nuclear detonations in orbit had been coordinated to create maximum electromagnetic disruption. The boarding parties had launched the moment the Catherine shields flickered. Thousands of humans had died in that first assault, their bodies frozen in the void, but they had damaged enough ships to create chaos in the formation, and then the real attack began. The recording showed weapons the Catherine had not anticipated. Computer viruses designed specifically to target their systems, biological agents that affected Catherine physiology, kinetic kill vehicles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, launched from railguns on the lunar surface. The humans had thrown everything they had at the fleet, holding nothing back. But it was the boarding actions that had broken the Catherine forces. Humans in spacesuits and armor had breached ship after ship. They died in horrific numbers, but they kept coming. For every human that fell, 2 more took their place. They fought in corridors designed for creatures twice their size. They used explosives with reckless abandon, sometimes killing themselves to destroy critical ship systems. One section of recording showed a human soldier, severely wounded, dragging himself toward a ship's reactor core. A Catherine officer tried to stop him. The human detonated explosives strapped to his chest, destroying himself, the officer, and the reactor containment field. The ship had gone critical minutes later. "They're willing to die," Telshar said in horror. "They don't retreat. They don't surrender. They just keep fighting until they win or they're all dead." Kreshovin had seen enough. He gathered all the data, all the recordings, all the analysis, and prepared his report for the Supreme Council. The news would devastate the Empire's confidence. 300 ships destroyed. Perhaps 50,000 crew members dead or missing, and the humans were still there, still armed, now enhanced with Catherine technology. But before he sent the report, one final drone returned. This one carried something different, a message from the humans. It was a simple text transmission, sent on frequencies the Catherine had used for their initial demand of surrender. The message was in perfect Catherine language, which meant they had already cracked the Empire's linguistic codes. To the Catherine Empire, "You came to our world seeking to conquer us. You believed we were weak because we fought among ourselves. You were wrong. When threatened, we are capable of putting aside every difference. We are capable of total war. We are capable of sacrifice you cannot comprehend. Your fleet is destroyed. Your ships are ours. Your technology is ours. We do not wish to continue this war. But if you send another fleet, we will do this again. And next time, we will not stop at defending our world. We will come to yours. Think carefully before you test us again." Signed, the United Government of Earth. The message ended with an attachment, a video file. Kreshovin played it with shaking hands. It showed rows of Catherine prisoners, hundreds of them, sitting in what appeared to be a converted hangar. They were alive, but their faces showed trauma that went beyond physical injury. Human guards stood watch, their weapons ready. A human officer spoke directly to the camera. "We have treated your people according to our laws of war. They have been fed. They have been given medical care. They have not been tortured or abused. When this is over, we will return them to you. But understand this. We took prisoners because we chose to. Because we are better than you thought we were. We could have killed them all. We still can. The choice of what happens next is yours." The recording ended. Kreshovin sat in silence for a long time, staring at the blank screen. The implications crashed over him like waves. The humans had won. Against every prediction, every assessment, every certainty the Empire had held, these primitives had defeated a fleet that should have crushed them in hours. And now they had hostages. They had technology. They had momentum. And most terrifying of all, they had sent a message that was not a plea for peace but a promise of greater violence if provoked. "What do we tell the Council?" Telshar asked quietly. "The truth," Kreshovin replied. that we have found an enemy unlike any we have faced before, an enemy that will not be conquered, an enemy that grows stronger from conflict, and that if we are wise, we will never ever go to Earth again. The Supreme Council would not want to hear it. The Empire had never retreated from a challenge, but Kreshovan had seen the recordings. He had heard the screams of his people as humans carved through their ships like vengeful spirits. He had seen the determination in human eyes and heard the defiance in their voices. The Catherine Empire had finally met a species that would rather die than submit. And in that meeting, the Empire had learned the most terrifying lesson of all. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was something far more dangerous. They were survivors who had learned to hunt. Captain Vekrin had never expected to be part of history. He was a scientist, not a warrior. His ship, the Silent Observer, was designed for stealth and reconnaissance, not combat. Its hull was lined with sensor-dampening materials that made it nearly invisible to detection. Its weapons were minimal, just enough for self-defense. Everything about the vessel was built for one purpose: to watch without being seen. Now he was watching humanity, and what he saw terrified him. The Supreme Council had debated for weeks after Admiral Kreshvan's report. Some members wanted immediate retaliation. Others argued for caution. In the end, caution won, but barely. The Council needed more information before deciding how to respond to this unprecedented disaster. They needed to understand what had happened, how it had happened, and most importantly, what humanity was capable of now. That was where Vekrin came in. His mission was simple in theory but dangerous in practice. Enter the Sol system undetected, observe human activity, gather intelligence on their current capabilities, avoid contact at all costs, and return with answers. The Silent Observer emerged from jump space at the edge of the Sol system, far beyond the orbit of the outermost planet. Vekrin had chosen the entry point carefully, using gravitational shadows and radiation from the local star to mask their arrival. For now, they were just another piece of cosmic background noise. Begin passive scans, he ordered. No active sensors. I don't want them to know we're here. His science officer, a brilliant female named Shalene, activated the observation systems. Instantly, the ship's computers began processing incoming data from across the electromagnetic spectrum. What they found made everyone on the bridge stop and stare. Captain, Shalene said slowly, the system is completely different from what our intelligence showed. The holographic display updated, showing the inner solar system. 3 months ago, there had been a handful of space stations orbiting Earth and a few research outposts on the Moon. Now there were hundreds of structures, battle stations bristling with weapons, shipyards actively constructing vessels, mining operations on asteroids that had been untouched before. The entire near-Earth environment had been transformed into a military-industrial complex. They've been busy, Vekrin muttered. He zoomed the display in on one of the larger stations. What is that? Shalene ran analysis programs. It appears to be a shipyard, Captain, but the design is unusual. It's using both human and Catherine construction techniques. They've integrated our technology into their own. Show me the ships. The image shifted to show the vessels under construction. Vekrin felt his stomach's knot. The ships were human in basic design but enhanced with Catherine technology. Energy shields, quantum drives, weapons that no species should have been able to reverse engineer in mere months. But there they were, being built by humans who 3 months ago couldn't travel faster than light. How is this possible? Asked the navigation officer. It took the Empire centuries to develop some of that technology. Because we weren't desperate, Vekrin replied quietly. Desperation accelerates innovation. The humans knew another fleet might come. They're preparing. The Silent Observer moved deeper into the system, maintaining stealth protocols. Vekrin ordered constant monitoring of all communications. The amount of radio and data traffic coming from Earth and its orbital facilities was staggering. The humans communicated constantly, coordinating efforts across their entire planet in dozens of languages. Captain, I've isolated military communications, Shalene reported. The encryption is advanced, but I think I can break it. Give me a few hours. Do it. I want to know what they're saying. While Shalene worked on the encryption, Vekrin studied the physical evidence of the battle. The debris fields were still there, slowly spreading across orbital space. Recovery operations were ongoing. Human ships moved among the wreckage, salvaging anything of value. Bodies were being collected and stored, presumably for later return. The humans were methodical and efficient, wasting nothing. One transmission caught his attention. It was unencrypted, broadcast in the open for anyone to hear. A human voice speaking in what the translator identified as English. Recovery Team 7 to command. We found another survivor pod. Catherine life signs detected. Bringing them in. Another survivor. Vekrin felt a surge of hope. Perhaps some of the fleet's crew had escaped after all, but then he listened to the rest of the transmission. Be careful with this one. The last survivor we found tried to kill himself rather than be captured. Keep them sedated until we reach the holding facility. Kill himself. Vekrin understood immediately. Whatever the humans had done to the captured Catherine, it had been bad enough that death seemed preferable to continued captivity. What had happened during those interrogations? Charlene finally cracked the military encryption. The information that flowed through the ship's computers was overwhelming. Battle reports, strategic assessments, resource allocations, technology development updates. All of it painted a picture of a species that had mobilized every resource toward a single goal: survival through strength. Captain, you need to hear this, Charlene said, her voice tight. I've found communications from before the battle, from when they first detected our fleet approaching. She played the recording. It was a conversation between human military leaders, dated 6 weeks before the Catherine fleet arrived at Earth. Telescopes confirm it. 300 ships, definitely not human origin, on approach vector for Earth. ETA 6 weeks. Jesus Christ. 300? Do we have any chance? Conventional military assessment says no. They'll glass our major cities before we can mount effective resistance. But we're not going conventional, we're going total. Explain. We unite every nation under emergency protocols. We pool every resource, every weapon, every soldier. We prepare orbital defenses using every satellite we can repurpose. We mine the approach vectors. We prepare boarding teams. Boarding teams? We're going to board alien warships? If they get close enough, yes. We can't win a straight fight, so we don't fight straight. We use every dirty trick we've ever invented. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, cyber warfare, nuclear weapons, suicide attacks if necessary. We make it so costly for them that even if they win, they'll never come back. That's insane. That's survival. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Time to show these aliens what humans are really good at. The recording ended. Vekrin sat back in his chair, processing what he had just heard. The humans had known the fleet was coming for 6 weeks. They had used that time to prepare a defense that should have been impossible. More than that, they had prepared to fight in ways the Catherine had never anticipated. Find more, he ordered. I want to know everything about how they fought. Over the next several days, the silent observer collected data from hundreds of sources, intercepted communications, recovered logs, even human news broadcasts that discussed the battle openly. Slowly, a complete picture emerged of what humanity had done. The dispersal of the energy beam aimed at Beijing had been just the beginning. Every nation on Earth had contributed to the defense. Russian nuclear weapons created the electromagnetic pulse. Chinese railguns on the moon provided kinetic strikes. American cyber warfare teams launched virus attacks on Catherine computer systems. European nations coordinated the logistics. African nations provided rare earth minerals for emergency weapon production. Asian manufacturing centers worked around the clock to produce equipment. But it was the boarding actions that had decided the battle. Humans had trained for weeks on how to breach a spaceship in zero gravity. They had studied every piece of intelligence about Catherine anatomy to find weak points. They had designed weapons specifically to penetrate Catherine armor. And they had recruited volunteers who understood they would probably die. Thousands had volunteered. Tens of thousands. One recording showed a briefing to a boarding team. The human officer's words were blunt and honest. You're probably not coming back. The enemy ships are designed to kill boarders. You'll face superior numbers in confined spaces. Your chances of survival are less than 20%. But if you succeed, if you can disable or destroy your target ship, you'll save millions of lives on Earth. So I'm asking you, who's willing to go? Every hand in the room went up. Vekrin watched that recording 3 times, trying to understand the psychology behind it. Humans knew they would die, yet they went anyway. Not because they were forced. Not because they were drugged or brainwashed, but because they believed their sacrifice mattered. They have a concept they call the greater good, Shaleen explained after researching human philosophy. The idea that individual survival is less important than the survival of the group. In their history, countless humans have died to protect others. They call it heroism. It's suicide, the tactical officer said. No, Vekrin corrected. Suicide is meaningless death. This is sacrifice with purpose. It's far more dangerous. The silent observer continued its observations, moving carefully through the system. Vekrin wanted to get closer to Earth itself, to see the planet that had defied the Empire. But that required extreme caution. Human sensor networks were far more sophisticated now. Upgraded with Catherine technology, they were detected anyway. The alarm came without warning. Shaleen's console lit up with proximity alerts.
Captain, we have company.
3 human ships, they've changed course to intercept us. That's impossible. We're in full stealth mode. Apparently it's not impossible anymore, Captain. They're hailing us. Vekrin's hearts raced. Being detected meant potential capture or destruction. But he had to know. Put it through. The human voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional. Unknown vessel. This is Earth Defense Cruiser Defiant. We know you're there. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection or we will fire. You have 60 seconds to comply. The Defiant. Vekrin pulled up information on the ship. It was one of the new hybrid vessels, human frame with Catherine systems. Fast, well-armed, and closing rapidly. How did they find us? He demanded. Shaleen was frantically analyzing sensor data. They're using a detection method we haven't seen before. It's based on quantum field fluctuations. They must have developed it from captured technology. Captain, our stealth systems are useless against it. Vekrin made a decision. They had learned enough. Staying meant capture, and he had no illusions about what human interrogation would be like. Prepare emergency jump. Get us out of here. Jump drive needs 2 minutes to charge. Then buy me 2 minutes. Evasive maneuvers. The silent observer accelerated, trying to put distance between itself and the approaching human ships. But the Defiant was faster. Much faster. And it wasn't alone. 2 more ships appeared from different vectors, coordinating their approach with military precision. They're trying to box us in, the tactical officer reported. Captain, they're good. Really good. Of course they were. Humans had been fighting each other in 3 dimensions for decades. They understood tactics and strategy in ways that came from hard experience. The Catherine had conquered lesser species. Humans had fought equals. Weapons fire lanced through space. The Defiant was shooting not to destroy but to disable. Precision strikes aimed at the silent observer's engines and communications array. Vekrin felt his ship shudder as a blast clipped the port stabilizer. Jump drive at 80%, Shaleen called out. Another hit. Systems alarm screamed throughout the ship. The humans were walking their fire closer, herding the silent observer into a kill box where escape would be impossible. 90%. 95%. The human voice came through again. Final warning. Power down or be destroyed. 100%. Jump drive ready. Go, Vekrin shouted. Reality twisted. The silent observer tore a hole in space and vanished, leaving the human ships behind. The jump was rough, poorly calculated, sending the ship tumbling through hyperspace before stabilizers compensated. But they were away. They were safe. Vekrin slumped in his chair, breathing heavily. Around him, his crew worked to assess damage and plot a course back to Catherine space. They had escaped, but barely. And the humans had let them go, Vekrin realized. Those final shots had been warnings, not serious attempts to destroy. The humans could have killed them, but chose not to. A message. They wanted the silent observer to return home. They wanted the Empire to know what they had seen. Get me all the data we collected, Vekrin ordered. Every recording, every intercept, every observation. The Supreme Council needs to see this. What will we tell them, Captain? Shaleen asked quietly. Vekrin looked at the retreating image of Earth on his displays. That beautiful blue world that had destroyed an Empire's fleet and emerged stronger from the conflict. He thought about the humans he had observed, their determination, their unity, their willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. "We'll tell them the truth," he said, "that we didn't lose to a primitive species. We lost to a species that has been preparing for war since before they discovered fire. We lost to a species that turns every challenge into a weapon. We lost to humanity. And what should the Empire do now?" Vekrin had no answer to that. The traditional response would be to send a larger fleet, to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. But he had seen how quickly they learned, how rapidly they adapted. In 3 months they had gone from chemical rockets to quantum drives. What would they be capable of in a year? In 5 years? "That's for the Council to decide," he finally said. "But if they ask my opinion, I'll tell them to leave Earth alone. Because the next time we go there, the humans won't be defending their home. They'll be bringing the war to us." The silent observer limped toward home, carrying data that would change everything the Catherine Empire believed about itself and its place in the galaxy. Somewhere behind them, humanity continued building, learning, preparing for whatever came next. The age of easy conquest was over. A new power had emerged, forged in the fire of desperate survival, and that power had a name that would soon echo across the stars: humanity. The Grand Council chamber had never been so silent. Captain Vekrin stood at the center of the massive room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the data his ship had collected from the Sol system. Above him, arranged in ascending tiers that reached toward the domed ceiling, sat the Supreme Council of the Catherine Empire. 50 of the most powerful individuals in known space, their faces grave as they absorbed the information being presented. Supreme Leader Krathnak sat on the highest throne, his ancient eyes fixed on the human ships displayed in the hologram. He had ruled for 3 centuries. He had overseen the conquest of 47 star systems. Never in his long reign had he faced a situation like this. "Explain to us again," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "how 300 warships were destroyed by a species that did not possess faster-than-light travel 3 months ago." Vekrin had been preparing for this moment during the entire journey home. He had rehearsed his words, organized his evidence, and steeled himself for the disbelief he would face. The Council would not want to believe that the Empire's greatest fleet had been crushed by primitives. They would look for excuses, for explanations that preserved their worldview, but there were no comfortable explanations. Only the brutal truth. "Supreme Leader, Council members," Vekrin began, "the humans defeated our fleet because we fundamentally misunderstood what kind of species they are. Our intelligence assessments were based on their technological level, but we failed to evaluate their tactical sophistication, their strategic thinking, and most critically, their psychology." He activated the first recording, the one that had been recovered from Fleet Commander Zalthor's ship. The Council watched as human boarding teams carved through Catherine defenses with brutal efficiency. They heard the screams. They saw the carnage. Several Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The humans knew we were coming 6 weeks before we arrived," Vekrin continued. "Their telescopes detected the fleet while we were still in deep space. They used that time to prepare a defense that exploited every weakness in our tactics." "Impossible," Council member Braycath interrupted. "Our approach was classified. Even if they detected ships, they couldn't have known our capabilities or our intentions." Vekrin had anticipated this objection. They assumed the worst-case scenario and planned accordingly. They prepared for an enemy with superior technology, superior numbers, and hostile intent. And they prepared to fight not a limited war but what they call total war. He brought up another display, showing human military doctrine. Total war is a concept where every resource, every citizen, every industry is mobilized toward victory. Nothing is held back. No sacrifice is too great. The humans have refined this concept over thousands of years of fighting each other. The next recording showed the human boarding teams being briefed before their mission. The Council watched as volunteers raised their hands, knowing they were accepting near certain death. Vekrin could see the confusion on some Council members' faces. Why would anyone volunteer to die? Human psychology is built around something they call tribalism, Vekrin explained. When threatened from outside, they will set aside internal differences and unite against the common enemy. We attacked Earth expecting to find 200 divided nations. Instead, we found 8 billion humans fighting as one force. Admiral Kreshvin, who had sponsored Vekran's reconnaissance mission, spoke up. Captain, show them the weapons analysis. Vekran nodded and brought up technical data. The humans used multiple attack vectors simultaneously. First, electromagnetic pulse weapons to disrupt our shields. Then kinetic strikes from railguns on their moon. Then cyber attacks specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in our computer systems. And finally, massed boarding actions. How did they board ships in space? Another council member asked. They had no spacecraft capable of matching our speed. They didn't need to match our speed, Counselor. They launched humans directly from railguns and rocket platforms. Thousands of them, wearing primitive spacesuits and carrying explosives. Most died in the void, but enough survived to reach our ships. And once inside, they used tactics learned from centuries of urban warfare. Vekran showed footage of humans fighting in the corridors of a Catherine destroyer. They moved in coordinated teams using cover effectively, communicating constantly. They threw grenades around corners and used shaped charges to blow through bulkheads. They were outmatched in size and strength by Catherine soldiers, but they compensated with superior tactics and an absolute refusal to retreat. They took casualties at a ratio of 10 to 1, Vekran said quietly, but they kept coming. For every human we killed, 2 more appeared. They fought in shifts, never allowing our crews to rest or regroup. They sabotaged life support, destroyed power systems, and specifically targeted command and control centers. The council watched in silence as the recordings showed ship after ship falling to human assault teams. Sometimes the ships were destroyed completely. Other times they were captured, their crews killed or taken prisoner. The pattern was always the same: relentless, coordinated assault followed by systematic destruction of resistance. Show them the prisoners, Krathnak commanded. Vekran hesitated, then complied. The footage showed Catherine captives in human detention facilities. They were alive and appeared physically healthy, but their eyes held a haunted look that spoke of psychological trauma. Human guards stood watch, but they weren't abusive. They were simply present, a constant reminder of defeat and captivity. We estimate the humans took approximately 500 prisoners, Vekran reported. They have treated them according to their laws of war, which forbid torture and require humane treatment. However, the interrogations were effective. He showed the council records of what the prisoners had revealed under questioning. The humans had learned everything about Catherine military organization, fleet tactics, technological capabilities, and most dangerously, the locations of imperial worlds, all without using physical torture, relying instead on psychological pressure and clever questioning. They recorded everything, Vekran said. Every battle, every interrogation, every moment of our defeat. And they broadcast it, not just to us, but to every species within communications range. They wanted the galaxy to know what happened when someone tried to conquer Earth. He played the human message, the one directed at the Catherine Empire. The council listened as the human spokesman calmly explained that they were ready to return prisoners, ready to negotiate peace, but also ready to continue the war if necessary. The threat was clear: attack again, and we will bring the war to your worlds. Supreme Leader Krathnak was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question everyone was thinking. What are they capable of now? Vekran brought up the latest observations from the Sol system. In 3 months, they have reverse-engineered our shield technology, our quantum drives, and our energy weapons. They are building warships that combine their tactical doctrine with our technology. Conservatively, within 1 year, they will have a fleet capable of projecting power beyond their solar system. Within 5 years, they could threaten Catherine space. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some members demanded immediate retaliation. Others argued for caution. The debate raged until Krathnak raised one massive hand for silence. What is your assessment, Captain? What should the Empire do? Vekran had known this question was coming. He had an entire journey home to consider his answer. As a military officer, he should recommend overwhelming force. As a scientist, he knew what the data showed. Supreme Leader, I believe we face 3 options. First, we could send a larger fleet, perhaps 2,000 ships, and attempt to overwhelm Earth through sheer numbers. But the humans are learning fast. They will adapt to whatever we send. And they have shown they are willing to accept catastrophic casualties to achieve victory. He paused, gathering his courage for what came next. Second, we could attempt a surprise attack using weapons of mass destruction to destroy Earth before they can respond. sterilize the entire planet. But this would require us to commit genocide against 8 billion sentients, and it would make enemies of every species in the galaxy. The humans have already shared their story widely. We would become the villains. And the third option? Krathnak asked. Peace. Negotiate a treaty that acknowledges Earth as an independent power. Return the prisoners as a gesture of good faith. Establish diplomatic relations. The humans have shown they do not seek conquest. They only want to be left alone. If we give them that, if we accept them as equals, we can avoid further conflict. The council chamber exploded again. Accept primitives as equals? Negotiate with species that had humiliated the Empire? It was unthinkable to many council members. The Empire did not negotiate with lesser species. The Empire conquered. But Admiral Kreshevan stood and spoke with the authority of his rank. Council members, we must face reality. The humans are not primitives anymore. They have our technology. They have proven tactical superiority, and they have something we lack: unity forged in desperation. If we continue this war, we will lose ships, we will lose soldiers, and we may lose worlds. Is pride worth that cost? Council member Brekath, who had been skeptical throughout, asked the hard question. If we negotiate peace with the humans, what message does that send to other species? That they can resist the Empire and win? Perhaps, Kreshevan replied. Or perhaps it sends the message that the Empire is wise enough to recognize when conquest is not worth the price. We have 47 systems. We are wealthy and powerful. Must we have 48 if it costs us everything? The debate continued for hours. Vakrin stood at the center, answering questions, showing evidence, explaining again and again what he had witnessed. Slowly, the council began to understand the scope of what had happened. This was not a military setback. It was a fundamental challenge to the Empire's worldview. Finally, as the discussion began to wind down, Supreme Leader Krathnak spoke again. Captain Vakrin, you have seen the humans up close. You have studied their tactics and their psychology. Tell me truly, if we negotiate peace, will they honor it? Vakrin thought about the recordings he had seen. Humans singing battle hymns as they charged to certain death. Humans coordinating across language and cultural barriers. Humans who had captured enemy soldiers and treated them with dignity, even after suffering terrible losses. Yes, Supreme Leader. I believe they will honor a fair peace treaty. Humans have a concept they call honor. It means keeping your word even when it's difficult. They also have a saying, peace through strength. They will negotiate from a position of power, but if we offer fair terms, I believe they will accept. And if we send another fleet? Then they will fight, and they will win, because they have already proven they can learn faster than we can adapt, because they are unified in a way we are not, and because they are willing to pay any price to protect their home. Krathnak sat back in his throne, his ancient face unreadable. Around him, the council waited for his judgment. The decision he made would affect the Empire for generations. Attack and risk everything. Negotiate and accept limitations to imperial power. Or do nothing and hope the humans remained in their own system. We will vote, Krathnak finally declared. But first I want every council member to watch all of Captain Vakrin's recordings. See what I have seen. Understand what we face. Then we will decide the future of the Catherine Empire. Vakrin bowed and stepped back. The council would deliberate and eventually they would vote. But he had done his duty. He had shown them the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. As he left the chamber, Shaleen was waiting for him. How did it go, Captain? As well as could be expected. They're scared, good. Fear breeds caution, and caution might keep us alive. Do you think they'll choose peace? Vakrin looked up at the stars visible through the station's dome. Out there, somewhere in the vast darkness, was a small blue planet inhabited by a species that had learned to fight before they learned to build. A species that had looked at certain defeat and decided to fight anyway. A species that was even now preparing for the possibility that the Empire might return. I hope so, he said quietly. Because if they don't, if we go back to Earth with another fleet, we won't be fighting a primitive species anymore. We'll be fighting an enemy that knows how to beat us, and that enemy will not stop at defending their home. They'll bring the war to us, and we'll lose. The truth hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. The age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had seen to that. Now the only question was whether the Catherine Empire was wise enough to accept the new reality before it was too late. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Earth, as humans now called it. 1 year since the Catherine Empire had lost 300 ships and learned that the galaxy was not theirs to command. 1 year of debate, deliberation, and dawning realization that the universe had changed forever. The Supreme Council had voted narrowly to pursue peace, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was unthinkable. In the months following that decision, the Empire had watched Earth's development with growing unease. Human ships now patrolled the Sol system with confidence. Human technology advanced at a pace that defied understanding, and human messages to the galaxy spoke of cooperation and mutual defense, not conquest. But the humans had also kept their word. Catherine prisoners had been returned, healthy if traumatized. No human ships had entered Imperial space without permission. The threats had been clear, but the actions had been measured. Earth was extending an olive branch while keeping a sword close at hand. Now representatives from both sides would meet to negotiate terms. The location chosen was neutral space, a system equidistant from both Earth and the Catherine homeworld. And the humans had made it clear. They would come in force, not to threaten, but to show they could not be intimidated. Admiral Kreshvin commanded the Catherine delegation. His ship, the Eternal Vigilance, was accompanied by 20 escorts, a show of strength but not aggression. He stood on his bridge watching the human fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel, with a mixture of awe and dread. There were 50 ships in the human formation. Each one was different, reflecting the diverse nations that had united to build them. Some were sleek and modern, others looked cobbled together from salvaged technology, but they all shared one characteristic. They radiated competence. These were not the ships of a species playing at space warfare. These were warships built by people who understood violence. "They're hailing us, Admiral," the communications officer reported. "Except," the view screen activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Her skin was dark, her hair cut short in a style Kreshvin had learned indicated military service. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with activity. "Admiral Kreshvin," she said in perfect Catherine language. "I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Earth Defense Forces. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We come in peace, but as you can see, we come prepared." Kreshvin inclined his head in a gesture of respect. "Admiral Chen, the Catherine Empire is ready to discuss terms. We acknowledge that the previous conflict was unfortunate." Chen's expression didn't change, but Kreshvin caught a flash of something in her eyes. Anger, perhaps, at the casual dismissal of 80,000 human deaths. But she controlled herself. "Yes, unfortunate. Let's make sure it never happens again. I'm transmitting coordinates for the negotiation station. Shall we proceed?" The station was small, built by neutral traders who operated in this region of space. It had conference facilities designed to accommodate multiple species. Kreshvin arrived with a delegation of 10, including Captain Vekrin, who had become the Empire's leading expert on human psychology. The human delegation was the same size, led by Admiral Chen and including diplomats from multiple Earth nations. The first meeting was formal and tense. Both sides presented their positions. The humans wanted several things: official recognition of Earth's sovereignty, return of all Catherine technology and weapons from captured ships, reparations for the attempted invasion, and a non-aggression pact that would bind both parties for at least 100 years. The Catherine Empire's position was more defensive. They wanted assurances that humans would not seek revenge, would not share captured technology with other species, and would not interfere in imperial affairs within existing Catherine space. The negotiations lasted for weeks. Every detail was debated, every clause examined from every angle. The humans were tough negotiators, never accepting vague language or half measures. They wanted everything in writing, everything explicit, everything enforceable. During a break in one session, Kreshvin found himself alone with Admiral Chen on one of the station's observation decks. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. "Your people fought well," Kreshvin finally said. Chen turned to look at him. 63,412. That's how many people we lost defending Earth. Soldiers, yes, but also civilians who were in the wrong place when your first strike came. Every one of them had a name, a family, dreams for the future. The weight of those numbers hung in the air. Kreshvin had seen casualty reports before, but humans had a way of making death personal that the Catherine did not share. "We lost 48,000 crew members," he replied quietly. "Most died in the first 3 days of the battle. Many more are still traumatized from their captivity. We treated them according to our laws, Chen said, her voice sharp. No torture, no abuse. Can you say the same about what your people planned for Earth? Kreshovan could not. The invasion plan had called for systematic enslavement of the human population. Those who resisted would have been eliminated. Those who complied would have been worked until they were no longer useful. It was the Empire's standard approach used on 47 previous worlds. No, he admitted. We cannot. Chen nodded, seeming to appreciate the honesty. Then let me be clear about something, Admiral. We don't want to be your enemies. We don't want to conquer your worlds or enslave your people. We just want to be left alone. But if you ever threaten Earth again, we will not defend. We will attack. We will bring the war to every Catherine world. We will make you feel what we felt when we saw your fleet approach our home. Do you understand? I understand. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Earth, as humans now called it. 1 year since the Catherine Empire had lost 300 ships and learned that the galaxy was not theirs to command. 1 year of debate, deliberation, and dawning realization that the universe had changed forever. The Supreme Council had voted narrowly to pursue peace. Not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was unthinkable. In the months following that decision, the Empire had watched Earth's development with growing unease. Human ships now patrolled the Sol system with confidence. Human technology advanced at a pace that defied understanding, and human messages to the galaxy spoke of cooperation and mutual defense, not conquest. But the humans had also kept their word. Catherine prisoners had been returned, healthy if traumatized. No human ships had entered Imperial space without permission. The threats had been clear, but the actions had been measured. Earth was extending an olive branch while keeping a sword close at hand. Now representatives from both sides would meet to negotiate terms. The location chosen was neutral space, a system equidistant from both Earth and the Catherine home world. And the humans had made it clear. They would come in force, not to threaten, but to show they could not be intimidated. Admiral Kreshovan commanded the Catherine delegation. His ship, the Eternal Vigilance, was accompanied by 20 escorts, a show of strength but not aggression. He stood on his bridge watching the human fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel, with a mixture of awe and dread. There were 50 ships in the human formation. Each one was different, reflecting the diverse nations that had united to build them. Some were sleek and modern, others looked cobbled together from salvaged technology. But they all shared one characteristic. They radiated competence. These were not the ships of a species playing at space warfare. These were warships built by people who understood violence. They're hailing us. Admiral, the communications officer reported. Accept. The view screen activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Her skin was dark, her hair cut short in a style Kreshovan had learned indicated military service. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with activity. Admiral Kreshovan, she said in perfect Catherine language. I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Earth Defense Forces. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We come in peace, but as you can see, we come prepared. Kreshovan inclined his head in a gesture of respect. Admiral Chen, the Catherine Empire is ready to discuss terms. We acknowledge that the previous conflict was unfortunate. Chen's expression didn't change, but Kreshovan caught a flash of something in her eyes. Anger, perhaps, at the casual dismissal of 80,000 human deaths. But she controlled herself. Yes, unfortunate. Let's make sure it never happens again. I'm transmitting coordinates for the negotiation station. Shall we proceed? The station was small, built by neutral traders who operated in this region of space. It had conference facilities designed to accommodate multiple species. Kreshovan arrived with a delegation of 10, including Captain Vekrin, who had become the Empire's leading expert on human psychology. The human delegation was the same size, led by Admiral Chen and including diplomats from multiple Earth nations. The first meeting was formal and tense. Both sides presented their positions. The humans wanted several things: official recognition of Earth's sovereignty, return of all Catherine technology and weapons from captured ships, reparations for the attempted invasion, and a non-aggression pact that would bind both parties for at least 100 years. The Catherine Empire's position was more defensive. They wanted assurances that humans would not seek revenge, would not share captured technology with other species, and would not interfere in imperial affairs within existing Catherine space. The negotiations lasted for weeks. Every detail was debated, every clause examined from every angle. The humans were tough negotiators, never accepting vague language or half measures. They wanted everything in writing, everything explicit, everything enforceable. During a break in one session, Kreshovin found himself alone with Admiral Chen on one of the station's observation decks. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. "Your people fought well," Kreshovin finally said. Chen turned to look at him. 63,412. That's how many people we lost defending Earth. Soldiers, yes, but also civilians who were in the wrong place when your first strike came. Every one of them had a name, a family, dreams for the future. The weight of those numbers hung in the air. Kreshovin had seen casualty reports before, but humans had a way of making death personal that the Catherine did not share. "We lost 48,000 crew members," he replied quietly. "Most died in the first 3 days of the battle. Many more are still traumatized from their captivity. We treated them according to our laws," Chen said, her voice sharp. "No torture, no abuse. Can you say the same about what your people planned for Earth?" Kreshovin could not. The invasion plan had called for systematic enslavement of the human population. Those who resisted would have been eliminated. Those who complied would have been worked until they were no longer useful. It was the Empire's standard approach used on 47 previous worlds. "No," he admitted. "We cannot." Chen nodded, seeming to appreciate the honesty. "Then let me be clear about something, Admiral. We don't want to be your enemies. We don't want to conquer your worlds or enslave your people. We just want to be left alone. But if you ever threaten Earth again, we will not defend. We will attack. We will bring the war to every Catherine world. We will make you feel what we felt when we saw your fleet approach our home. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good, because there are other species watching this negotiation. Species your empire has conquered in the past. They've contacted us. They want to know if resistance is possible. They want to know if the empire can be beaten. What we do here, what treaty we sign, will send a message to the entire galaxy." Kreshovin felt a chill run through his body. He had not considered the wider implications. If other conquered species saw humans successfully negotiate as equals with the Empire, they might rebel. The Empire's carefully constructed order could collapse. "What message do you want to send?" he asked. Chen smiled, but it was not a warm expression. "That the age of empires built on conquest is ending. That species have a right to self-determination. That those who seek to dominate others will face consequences. Call it the Earth Doctrine." The negotiations continued, but the conversation with Chen had changed Kreshovin's perspective. This was not just about Earth and the Catherine Empire. This was about the future of the entire galaxy, and humans, whether they realized it or not, were positioning themselves as champions of the conquered. Finally, after 6 weeks of intense discussion, a treaty was drafted. The terms were harsh but fair. The Catherine Empire would formally recognize Earth's sovereignty and independence. They would pay reparations in the form of technology and resources. They would agree to a non-aggression pact lasting 200 years. And critically, they would not interfere if other species sought to negotiate similar arrangements. In return, humans would not share captured Catherine military technology with other species, would respect imperial borders, and would return all prisoners who wished to go home. The treaty included a provision for joint scientific research and cultural exchange, suggesting that one day, perhaps, the two species might become allies rather than enemies. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species watched as Admiral Chen and Supreme Leader Krathnak placed their marks on the treaty document. It was a historic moment, the first time the Catherine Empire had negotiated as equals with a species they had tried to conquer. But it was what happened after the signing that truly shocked the galaxy. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Chen approached the microphone and spoke directly to the assembled representatives and the countless species watching the broadcast. "Today, Earth and the Catherine Empire have chosen peace over war," she said. "But this treaty is about more than just our two peoples. It is a statement of principle. Every intelligent species has the right to determine their own destiny. Every species has the right to defend their home, and every species has the right to say no to conquest." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We know that many of you have suffered under imperial rule. We know that many of you have dreamed of freedom but believed it was impossible. Today we tell you that it is possible. Resistance is possible. Victory is possible. Peace is possible. But you must be willing to fight for it. Earth stands ready to assist any species that seeks to negotiate their independence. We will share our defensive technologies with those who ask. We will stand with those who stand for freedom. The age of easy conquest is over. The galaxy is changing, and humanity will be part of that change. The broadcast ended, but the repercussions were immediate. Within days, 3 species that the Catherine Empire had conquered sent diplomatic messages to Earth requesting assistance. Within weeks, 5 more joined them. The Empire's hold on its territories began to weaken as conquered peoples looked to Earth as an example and a potential ally. Kreshvin watched these developments with a mixture of resignation and respect. The humans had done exactly what he had feared. They had not just defeated the Empire militarily, they had defeated them ideologically. They had shown that resistance was possible and created a coalition of the willing. A message arrived for him from Captain Vekrin, who had returned to Catherine space to resume his research duties. The message was brief but significant. Admiral, the Council is meeting in emergency session. Several outer colonies are demanding greater autonomy. Some are threatening to seek Earth's protection if their demands are not met. The Empire is fracturing. What humans could not do with weapons, they are doing with ideas. I thought you should know. Kreshvin read the message 3 times, then deleted it. He understood now what was happening. The Empire had based its power on the assumption that resistance was futile, that superior technology and numbers would always prevail. Humans had shattered that assumption. They had shown that determination, unity, and willingness to sacrifice could overcome technological disadvantage. More importantly, they had shown that they survived. They had not just defeated the Catherine fleet. They had thrived in the aftermath. They had grown stronger. And that example was more powerful than any weapon. Months passed. The treaty held, though tensions remained high. Human ships began appearing at the edges of Catherine space, not threateningly, but as a constant reminder of their presence. More species negotiated independence or greater autonomy from the Empire. Some even joined together in a loose coalition, with Earth as an informal leader. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around a new principle: mutual defense and cooperation rather than conquest and domination. It was messy and chaotic, but it was also hopeful in a way the old order had never been. Kreshvin found himself thinking about a human saying he had learned during the negotiations. It came from their ancient history, spoken by a leader named Theodore Roosevelt. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Humans had proven they had a very big stick. 300 destroyed Catherine warships testified to that, but they were also speaking softly, offering cooperation and partnership to those who approached in good faith. It was a balance the Empire had never understood. One day, Kreshvin received a message from Admiral Chen. It was personal, not official, and brief. Admiral, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to tell you something I did not say during negotiations. Your people could have won if you had sent 5,000 ships instead of 300. If you had attacked without warning, if you had shown no mercy, you could have conquered Earth. But you didn't because you believed we were weak. You were wrong about that. But you were also wrong about something else. Strength is not just about weapons or numbers. It's about will. It's about what you're willing to endure and what you're willing to sacrifice. Your empire had numbers. We had will. That made all the difference. I hope we never have to test that equation again. But if we do, I hope you remember what happened last time. Peace, Admiral Chen. Kreshvin stared at the message for a long time. She was right, of course. The Empire could have won through overwhelming force. But they had been arrogant, and that arrogance had cost them everything. He composed a reply, carefully choosing his words. Admiral Chen, your words are wise, and I will not forget them. The Empire learned a harsh lesson about underestimating opponents. We will not make that mistake again. But I hope, as you do, that we never need to test ourselves against each other in combat. There is enough universe for both our peoples. Perhaps one day we will be allies rather than former enemies. Until then, I remain respectful of your people and cautious of your capabilities. Admiral Kreshvin. He sent the message and turned back to his duties. The Empire was changing, adapting to a new reality where conquest was no longer simple or safe. Some welcomed the change. Others resisted it. But everyone understood that the galaxy had fundamentally shifted, And at the center of that shift was a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, a planet whose people had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway, a planet that had paid a terrible price for victory but emerged stronger from the crucible. Earth. The Catherine Empire had 50 ships for every human vessel. They had technology developed over millennia. They had conquered 47 star systems. But none of that had mattered when they faced a species that refused to surrender. Kreshovan understood now why no survivors of the Earth assault had returned to tell a terrifying story. It was because humanity had written a different story, one where they were not victims but victors, one where they had taken the worst the galaxy could throw at them and survived, one where they had turned defense into offense and weakness into strength. And that story was spreading across the stars, inspiring others, changing everything. The Empire would endure, but it would never be the same, because now every species knew the truth. Conquest was not inevitable. Resistance was possible. And somewhere in the cosmos, humanity stood ready to prove it again if necessary. The age of easy empires was over. The age of Earth had begun, and in the end that was the most terrifying story of all.